Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm 𝗤𝗏𝗀𝗏. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, you were prepared for this one because you did some recordings yesterday.
I did. I was. You guys will probably see these videos probably before this airs, but Chris Ray Anderson from CAR, I had him on here, and we were talking about really two things that are on the forefront here. They're big for all Chicago investors or housing providers, and those couple topics are the attempt that they're trying to make the CRLTO some modifications, so it's a little more fair to the landlords. And there's some a call to action that I'm not sure we'll hit before this happens, but you'll probably know what all those emails are getting is post when you hear this. But yeah, we're just trying to stay out in front, working with MBOA, with CAA, with IAR, with Chicago Association of Realtors. We just want to make sure that we're getting all this information, getting it out to you guys, because we're almost working as an additional arm for public services. So that's the one issue that is front and center. And then the fair eviction ordinance, just eviction ordinance, I'm sorry, is another thing that's on the block to be discussed here in the next few months that we all have to make sure that we're part of that discussion.
Yeah, educate yourself, understand what's going on, and then get involved. Like this is like this is one of the biggest variables that will affect your investments. So understand the playing field and what you can do to help.
Yeah, and there's a lot. I mean, between everyone I just said, like there's a lot of people that are all seem like just in this last year have really started teaming up and working together versus kind of working on their own agenda, which I think is a huge benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've gone like 3 episodes without naming Mike Glasser, so let's go ahead and just throw his name out.
All right, Mike Glasser. There's our two name quota.
All right, what do we got for the housing provider tip of the week?
So housing provider tip of the week. This I was thinking about this because I've been working a little in GC in the maintenance department lately, kind of building out some process there. And the one thing that we've always realized, in the city, we have these garden apartments or basement apartments, whatever you want to call them. People avoid basement and call it garden, even though it's only got a little 2 feet above of ground level. But in those basement apartments, you are always going to run into moisture issues. Anyone that has a basement, I don't care if you have a basement that is built in the 60s or in the 1860s, you're going to have moisture issues. And you're going to, once those walls are closed up, it's hard to know where it's coming from. And it's hard to regulate unless you have something. Now you can throw some dehumidifiers down there and go that route. But, we have taken practice over the years of putting central AC in these basement units to at least keep airflow going. Because a lot of times you can't put window units in some of these basement units. And you usually run into 2 problems eventually if you have a basement unit. You're either going to have some sort of moisture issues where the tenant's going to complain, or you're going to have some sort of moisture issue where the tenant doesn't complain and you don't find out till it's a huge problem. So keeping the air quality kind of regulated is something that's going to be important if you're going to be buying a building that has a garden or basement apartment. And I think one of the easiest ways to install AC, you can usually get a better tenant and keep a tenant longer when you have a central air in a building as well too. Sometimes if you're in a building that the rest of them don't have, you might get a little jealousy, but just keep that in mind. It's probably the best way you can regulate or prevent moisture or mold type issues in these basement garden apartments.
Good stuff.
So today's show, I'm pretty excited. We have our guest is President and CEO of Community Investment Corporation, CIC. So this is our second episode that we've had with CIC. We had Jack Crane back, episode 45, who's always an entertaining fellow. And today's guest is the source of loans for rehabilitation for multifamily residential buildings in the Chicago area. That's really what CIC does. They've been around since 1984. We talked a lot about their history in the episode with Jack. So if you guys want to hear more about the history, reference that episode 45. But our guest served as the director of a preservation compact, which is a collaborative dedicated to preserving affordable rental housing. We're going to talk about affordable housing today and really what the definition is. She's led a number of joint policy efforts, including driving property tax relief for affordable housing that got signed into law this year. We'll talk more about that. She's played a key role in coordinating federal rental relief with state and local programs to keep these families in houses and landlords getting paid so their mortgages get paid. So she's been addressing the needs identified by her policy work, and she's developed innovative financing programs to support investment and rehab of distressed 1 to 4 unit buildings over time. Prior to her working at CIC and the compact, she consulted with the MacArthur Foundation in developing the Preservation Compact. and she was assistant to the mayor on affordable housing in the city of Chicago. So we got some behind the scenes information. Maybe we'll get today too. So, she's completed her undergraduate at Northwestern and received her master's from Harris School at University of Chicago. We're really excited to have Stacie Young here on the show today. Stacie, I rambled on a little, but did I cover everything, or is there anything I left off?
No, it's great. It's great. I'd be happy to talk about any one of those things that you just mentioned.
Awesome. So let's start this off where, we hear the words, it's in the headlines a lot, the affordable housing. If you're in the suburbs, you're in the city, I think it's something that's almost on in the news across the country, but like, what is affordable housing? In my mind, it's like, all right, if rent's under $1,000, it's affordable like that. Like, what is truly affordable housing from the stance of where you guys are fighting all these battles?
So affordable housing has so many different definitions. And what really matters is people's perception of what it is. As you say, it's very confusing. There's an official definition, but when I think about affordable housing, I think about what anyone can afford. So if you earn $100,000 a year, you shouldn't be paying more than 30% of your income on housing. If you earn $20,000 a year, you shouldn't be paying more than 30% of your income on housing. That's a general definition. The federal government has some very specific definitions. And so they talk about area median incomes, and they're looking at averages of median income. That's what that is. And then they look at rents that people can afford at these different incomes. And they look at how much you can afford depending on your income. That's the official definition. Here in Chicago, there are just some markets that are more affordable than others. Not every unit has to abide by a federal government standard. But certainly in Chicago, we have some neighborhoods where the values are lower and then the rents are lower. So there's sort of official definitions and then unofficial definitions.
Gotcha. And you've been a part of the conversation around the ADUs and this pilot program that was launched. Like, kind of tell us a little bit about how you were involved in that and how that is supposed to help affordable housing.
So we care about affordable housing, right? And again, when people think about affordable housing, sometimes they think about the only way we can create affordable housing is if federal dollars flow into a building or a unit. When really, it's you all, your listeners, who are out there doing the hard work every day of creating affordable housing, investing in affordable housing. What we found looking across the country is a lot of these new policies have been sprouting up. The way I think about ADUs and why it matters for affordable housing is that basement unit typically has a lower rent. So again, this isn't an official federal government definition, but certainly you can't get as much rent for that basement unit as those upper units, right? And so the more we can encourage owners to fix up and create these basement units, those rents will naturally be more affordable, and the government doesn't have to pay for it. It's a very efficient way of encouraging investment and creating units that will be naturally more affordable than those other buildings, other units up on top. So the city of Chicago recognized this. There were a bunch of meetings that took place to inform that policy. At the end of the day, instead of coming up with a big policy for the whole city, they created a pilot for a lot of different little areas across the city. Primarily, if you're in one of those areas, they are trying to make it easier for you to create these basement units by taking out that that zoning piece, by not making you go to your alderman and deal with the fact that you can't provide parking, et cetera. What they're saying in these pilot zones is you can just create that basement unit. Your obligation is to keep every other unit, 50% of your units, depending on how many you create, keep them affordable. What that means is keep those units at or above, think about $1,200, $1,300 per unit. But again, your first unit doesn't have any requirement. Your second unit will have that requirement if you're in a pilot area and you're creating those basement units.
Why I'm not sure if you know the answer, or if I'll take an opinion as well too. Why do you think the city has made it so difficult in the past? I've been through that zoning process and sending notice to everybody, and $10,000 in attorney fees later. And 6 months later, I got denied for making that basement unit legal. Like, why do you think there's been so many hoops to jump through in the past? Why do you think this hasn't been a more user-friendly system inside the city in the past?
It's a great question. I think a lot of that has to do with density and parking. So it depends on the neighborhood you live in, right? And if there's, so many multifamily units already, The city doesn't like the idea of creating more density, adding more units and families without also adding more parking. So that parking requirement is kind of related to a concern about density. And this is from a million years ago. This is not anything new, I don't think. And so the idea is, you know, if you're going to create more units, you have to create the parking. I don't think that policy contemplated adding a couple of basement units, right? It's not going to be some scale where you're going to need a new school and you're going to need, you know, a parking structure to accommodate this. So I think that in the past, the reason they had that rule in place was kind of for a larger scale issue. And so for this, they call this gentle density across the country, which is gentle density. And so they're trying to make it a little bit easier for this little bit of extra investment. That, again, to me is so wonderful that you're going to get private investment to create more affordable units.
I'll tie this together. MacArthur, Preservation Pact, like how has that like worked with the city or to just create more affordable housing? Like, well, what's like your mission been there when you're involved in those groups? Just so we kind of have a historical reference of where you've came from and where affordable housing is trying to go.
So the Preservation Compact, the purpose was to focus like a laser on preserving affordable rental. There are a lot of existing buildings. Some of them have government subsidy. Most of them do not. A lot of existing buildings that have more affordable rents out in the neighborhoods that had been kind of overlooked in the past. The government dollars typically are targeted to new construction, and that's really exciting and it gets lots of attention. There isn't a lot of attention on these existing buildings and the need to invest in those. So the Preservation Compact was created to bring everybody to the table. The nonprofits, the grassroots, the for-profit developers, and the government, and that includes the city, the state, the Chicago Housing Authority, Cook County, the federal government, bring them all together to think about, as a one-stop shop, what are ways that we can preserve the existing buildings that we have? Because if we lose those buildings, it's 10 times more expensive, literally, to build a new rental unit than it is to preserve a unit that we have. One of the big outcomes of these discussions is how important that we call it naturally occurring affordable housing, that unsubsidized rental housing does not receive federal subsidy, but is affordable because it is located in neighborhoods where the values are lower. A lot of those owners are not part of the policy conversations. And so what the Preservation Compact has done is bring this entire new angle of the discussion by bringing private owners to the table who typically weren't part of affordable housing discussions. So the notion was, what do we need to do? We need operating costs are too expensive, energy efficiency tools. Property taxes are too expensive, property tax relief. What other strategies can we use? How about basement units? Should we be paying more attention to some types of buildings that have been overlooked in the past, like two flats? So a lot of these discussions are coming up from a very diverse group of constituents. And the idea is we, the Preservation Compact, are bringing people together to come up with the right ways, the efficient ways to preserve affordable rental, much of which is owned by the private market. And a lot of these players, the city of Chicago, you mentioned them specifically, had not been engaging those players prior to the past few years when the Preservation Compact came together.
Stacie, that's great stuff. Can you share just some actual dollar amounts or actual stats from the Preservation Compact? Because you go on the website, it's pretty impressive, just like the amount of loan programs, the amount of investment opportunity, et cetera.
Thanks for asking. I'm going to have to go onto the website myself and ask that question to myself, because again, you know, we are really focused on making sure that those policies are in place. And again, the impact that we think of is for the individual owners. What does this mean? So building code relief is something I didn't even mention. Building code relief, I don't have to tell you all how important it is. But again, we brought these different folks to the table and said, I know you care about building code relief. What are the 3 things that we should be talking to the city about? And of course, plumbing was one of those things. Electrical was one of those things. And at the time, Commissioner Judy Friedland understood this part of the rental stock very well and said, you know what? Let's do those things. And so we worked together and she put together a pilot program for plumbing relief So it's not part of the code yet, but the notion is we can save so much money if we're allowing alternative materials to copper, right? And so that's one of the impressive numbers on here is $34 million that's been saved by allowing these alternative materials to copper. Another one is the energy savings. Energy savings, thanks to, again, lots of resources from the utilities, financing from CIC, owners can save 25 to 30% on their energy bills. Coordinating the property tax incentive proposal, which I'm happy to talk about later, that is going to save, I can't even say, untold amounts of money to not just incentivize affordable units, but to save owners real money and incentivize investment. So thank you for asking about that. I generally am thinking about the policies and what we need to do to push them through, but the impact, once you look at it, is also notable.
It's impressive. And I guess real quick, if I'm a listener saying, wow, that's great, I would love to get involved, I would love to know more, go ahead and plug, like, where should they go? Where should they learn more about this? How can they become involved? How can they get involved?
Great question too. So the Preservation Compact's website is preservationcompact.org. So learn about the different issues that we're working on. We're happy to help access any of the resources that are up there, but we are always looking for people to engage, to talk about issues, to identify issues. A lot of the time, as I said before, the government agencies, they barely know about the private market owners, right? The Emergency Rental Assistance Program, again, happy to talk about that later. We worked very hard with the NBOA to make sure that the NBOA folks were part of these discussions. The national discussion, same thing. How do we make sure that private owners are explaining their situation, because they actually do own most of the affordable rental? So definitely look at the website, see what we've got going on. And then you can call CIC, you can call me, you can call 𝗬𝘃𝗲𝗵𝗁 or 𝗬𝘃𝗲𝗫𝗂, who are the staff people, and you can find their information on the website.
Well, I think our goal is to get Judith Freeland on here to talk about some of that as well, too. We had an introduction a few weeks ago. So looking forward to that and what she'll bring and tie into this conversation. But I think, Stacie, one thing that we should take away from the show afterwards is connecting your contacts with a lot of the information you just rattled off. Nobody has any clue about. Nothing negative towards the programs, but just the everyday investor that's looking to build a small portfolio. Our listeners are not aware of these things. And you know, they have these 15, 20, might be a couple more than that, real estate investment groups that, you know, meet monthly and all that. We got to get those people on the circuits. They invite yahoos like me and Tom to go talk at these groups. Like we're nothing compared to the information that this information could spread if we get them. And it just ends up being a thing of us just making the introductions to get the right people to get in front of the right people. And that's why I think if anything comes away from this episode, I think that would be a huge win right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it sort of goes both ways. I think the government folks are like, holy cow, this is who's providing our housing. These are the issues that affect them. We have to be careful with our policies to make sure we're not having an adverse impact, which doesn't say, you said at the top of the call, you know, there's some worrisome policies that are out there. I do think that the city is aware of the impacts. And so when those policies come out that have adverse impacts, NBOA, and you all are smart for coming back and saying, okay, you're kind of hurting us with this one. Can you talk to us about this one? And I feel like they're open to those discussions in a way they weren't in the past because they're hearing from you directly.
Yes. Huge. So, all right. You brought it up, emergency rental assistance. You know, I'd love to hear what you know about that, but also the question I get asked all the time is like, how long is this going to go on for? I keep hearing new tranches and like, this might be an opinion question, but I've heard things can go on for the next couple of years as far as emergency rental assistance. I mean, give us kind of a lowdown of what you know that our listeners want to know.
Yeah, so emergency rental assistance has gotten many different, as you say, tranches. You can call it whatever you'd like. In 2020, the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the Illinois Housing Development Authority, the state, all had separate programs. Some of them had multiple rounds of programs for emergency rental assistance. They all came out with all that money got spent in 2020. They came out with new programs that they launched in May and June of this year. All of that money is currently being doled out. A lot of it has already been doled out. And I will do a plug for the state of Illinois in particular. For a few weeks there, I believe our state was deploying more money than any other state in the country. A lot of these programs across the country have had trouble getting their money out for different reasons. It's not necessarily the government's problem. It is the government's problem, I should say. But it is a difficult thing to come up with a brand new program to serve a brand new group of people. I keep saying the private owners are not constituents that the government has ever served before. This is not, they are accustomed to a nonprofit or for-profit subsidized developer. So they had to create a gigantic new program to serve a constituency they barely know and to try to do it effectively. So again, right now, a lot of that 2021 money is still going out the door, has not arrived yet. I will also say the 2021 round really addressed some of the problems that came up in the 2020 round because the governments were listening. When that 2021 money is out, there is new money from the legislation that was signed this March at the federal level by President Biden that is going to be going out this fall. And again, the timeline is a little longer for that. It does have a couple of years to go out the door. So all that being said, it's a lot of money. The governor had a press release that said $1.5 billion in Illinois, and that's a lot of money. There's also a lot of need. And so again, if you applied already, you might still be waiting for your money. If you didn't get your money or you didn't apply, there's still ways to get money right now. We at the Preservation Compact, this is one of the things we've tried to do. We have convened governments every week to say, let's coordinate your programs. We created one webpage where all that emergency rental assistance can be found. It's 𝗬𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗵𝗁, get it? Chicago, Cook County, Illinois, renthelp.com. Maybe it's .org. I'll check that. That has 3 open rounds right now that you can apply for. So if you didn't get what you wanted to get, if you forgot to apply, didn't apply for whatever reason, that webpage has information right now. When those fall rounds open up, that webpage will have all the information, how to apply, why you should apply for one over the other, how it works. We try to add value in that way. The governments are doing their best. They're trying to get feedback from you all and incorporate it. Their hands are tied by the federal government in some ways, but there's a lot of money. It's not going to work for everyone. And again, the governments are doing their best.
Yep. So Stacie, that's great stuff. And I know the majority of housing providers are probably relieved, that we're having this assistance, right? It's coming in at a great time when, we're having struggles with certain tenants. One of the murmurs I've started to hear though is like, well, my tenant might not pay now, right? Maybe they were paying, they found out so-and-so didn't pay, and that I, filled out the form and, the government will just take care of it. Like, do you see the potential negative side effects here? And do you have an opinion on that?
Absolutely. Have been hearing that from owners from the get-go. In January 2021, the owners were saying, oh my gosh, what a disaster. Everyone knows there's more relief coming. They're going to stop paying. I think I have a lot more to say about this, but I'll just touch on this, which is owners are devastated by a couple of tenants doing the wrong thing. And I am not an owner. That is my understanding. Because they are devastated by that, they talk about it a lot. As a result, there are a lot of tenants who actually do the right thing. Owners rarely talk about those tenants. And I think that's a mistake. I think that you certainly have this group of tenants who will take advantage of the system, and they do take advantage of the system. At the end of the day, when I ask the owners how much assistance they're applying for, they don't have to apply for 80% of their tenants. They have to apply for 20% or 30% of their tenants, if that, because the other tenants are trying to keep up and are keeping up. So again, yes, that is definitely a problem. It is not a problem with 100% of the tenants. And again, you are, as an owner, going to apply for those arrearages. If you don't get those arrearages paid for in this current 2021 round from the spring, then you can apply again in the fall. And again, that money is going to be out and about for another couple of years, most likely.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of pros and cons. And I think back to that 80-20 rule, we were only hearing the complainers coming out of the 20% for the most part, including myself. I'm one of those 20% complainers sometimes. Because I did have exactly how you described, Tom. I think I had multiple that kind of took that stance. So, but it truly is 20% or less of my tenants because the rest are good. Talking about, we kind of said the program, the tax incentive program, we started talking about that. I'd love to hear about the tax incentive here in Illinois for investors. If you could kind of give us a rundown what exactly it is, where it came from, and where people can find more information.
Yes. So we all know if you're a rental owner and you had affordable units in your building, and again, when I say affordable, I just mean generally, your units were renting out for, $1,100 or less, something along those lines. You might be familiar with Cook County Class 9 program. If you're not, that's fine. I'll just cut to the chase and say that program used to be an incentive to invest in your building and create affordable units, but it stopped being effective about 10 or 12 years ago. And so that's when the Preservation Compact was getting started. And we said, what we can do is get all these folks together and talk about a new property tax incentive that works kind of like that other one worked. And that's how it came about. And it follows a lot of the same general guidelines as the Class 9 program. It says you have to invest in your building, and I can talk about exactly how much that is. It says you have to keep a certain portion of your units affordable, and I can talk about how that works. And it says you have to do that for 10 years, and you can renew for up to 30 years. So that's the general outline of the program. You have to invest, you have to keep some units affordable, and then you get a certain reduction, depending on those first two things, on your assessed valuation.
So Stacie, that's awesome. Can we do specifics? Like, would you mind, you said you can talk about examples. Can you either do like a recent one that you guys did, or I think our listeners would love to know like the actual numbers.
Absolutely. So the one that is going to be most like that old program is a requirement that you invest at least $1,250 per square foot in your property, right? It could be new construction too, but $1,250 investment in rehab, and that you hold 35% of your units affordable to folks who earn less than 60% of AMI, which just means round about $900 to $1,200 a month. And again, depending on your bedroom size, depending on a lot of things. That's the biggest incentive. And then that reduces your assessed valuation by 35%. There's another, and then there's another one, same thing. If you invest $850 a square foot, if you hold 15% of your units affordable at that same level, you get a 25% reduction off of your assessed valuation. So those two are going to be, it's self-selection. So you decide. To me, if you already have a building that is in a low value market, right? A low cost market, you probably have rents at about those levels anyway. So that 35% reduction is probably what you'll go for. You'll increase, maybe you were planning to do a rehab. You're going to make sure that rehab is at least $1,250 a square foot in order to qualify, which is great because we need investment in those neighborhoods. You hold 35% of units affordable and you get a 35% reduction in your assessed value. Same is true for that other tier that I mentioned. There's a third tier I'm happy to talk about. It's a little bit different because it only applies downtown, but I'm happy to talk about that one too.
So, and this can be done like on a 2-unit or a 3-unit, even like on a smaller scale?
No.
As long as you're hitting those numbers?
That is a very good question, Tom. No, it has to be 7 units or more, but I will say this. If you got a 6 flat and you're going to invest in a basement unit and you're creating a 7 flat, which now qualifies, that counts. So again, a straight 6 flat, unfortunately, according to the assessor's office, because the way they classify properties, will not be eligible. But if you invest in that basement unit to create a 7-unit property, then it does qualify. So again, 7 units and above.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, in $1,250 a square foot, that's not. Think about if a normal apartment unit's 800 square feet or whatever, that's like 10 grand, right? Like it's 10 grand a door. It's not like this huge investment.
Right.
You're like, a lot of us are probably doing that anyways, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Is that price per square foot rehab, does that include exterior? Like if you're going to put a $40,000 roof on a 6 flat?
Yes. Very important question. So it must include at least 2 systems. Those systems can include everything you just mentioned, right? Roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, marble countertops don't count. But any of those, any systems, energy efficiency is considered a system. Accessibility, making your units accessible, counts as an investment. So that's absolutely right. You don't have to do a gut rehab to qualify. The point is that stock, especially in those lower value markets, needs investment. We want to incentivize that.
Awesome. I never knew about that.
I know. I got a bunch of clients that I know could probably benefit from that as well too. So I'm gonna. One
last question to just drill it home. Let's say one of our listeners is listening, like, "Oh, I didn't know about this." Is there any? If you've already done the rehab, is it, "Hey, on to the next one"?
Great.
You missed the boat.
Varied. Tom, thinking all the time. There is a look back, and this is because that old program did not have a look back. So if you've done that rehab and you've got your building permits to show for it. This looks back, I believe, 4 or 5 years. So it's quite generous look back. That being said, you do not get the relief for those past years, right? So for instance, if you're looking at that 10-year horizon and you did your work 3 years ago, now you get 7 years of relief that can be renewed every 10 years, as long as you go to the Department of Buildings, get a clean bill of health in terms of inspections, and then you can renew it for another 10 years. And I don't want to leave out this lower tier, which is 15% affordability. For a higher cost market, you may not want to artificially lower your rents on 35% of your units, but maybe you're okay with lowering your rents on 15% of your units, right? And so you don't get as much relief on that one. You get 25% relief. But that's still enough to offset in some of these markets, not in Lincoln Park, but maybe in Lincoln Square, Rogers Park, Albany Park, you're going to be able to reduce your rents on 15% of units and still get a 25% reduction on your assessed valuation.
Yep. And where can we find, if I'm in Albany Park, I'm wherever, where can I find like that threshold of rent of where I need to be? Like, is there a website that just says in this zip code, you gotta be at 900 or whatever the number is?
Yeah, so I will make sure that all of that is on our website. So we have a handy dandy table that shows these different tiers, exactly what you need to do to be eligible, how it works. And we will add links to those rent tables that you just mentioned, because that's an important thing to understand. Again, it's 60% of AMI, which translates to about, for a 2-bedroom, about $1,200. But it depends on who's paying heat and all these other things. But we will definitely get a link to that. It'll take me 10 minutes to describe where to find it. So we'll provide a link.
All right. You got about 3 weeks before this airs. One more question on this. What about if the property sells? Is it transferable? There was reduced. Tell us about that. If it sells, or say I buy a property from somebody that just did a rehab, can I still apply for that even though the last guy put the money into it?
So yes, my understanding. So your second question, I'm not as clear about, because you would need to show those permits. You would need to show that work was done. So if you have a beautiful arrangement with that seller, good for you. If you are selling the property after you got the relief, yes, that relief runs with the land. I do believe you are going to, that owner needs to kind of understand how it works. Like I said, that reapplying every 10 years, right? Making sure that your building is up to snuff. That new owner has to be in compliance. Every year, you have to tell the assessor's office that indeed you're keeping your rents at the required level. So there's some compliance. It's not that hard. We're working at the assessor's office on it now to make sure that it makes sense.
Awesome. All right, cool. On the show that we had with Jack, he went over some loan programs, but I know there's some other stuff that we didn't cover on the show or might be newer. Can you kind of give us a rundown? I think you guys have 3 newer programs. If you can kind of give us a rundown on that for so people know what you guys have to offer there.
We have some very exciting programs. I'm so glad you asked, Mark. One program that we worked on with the city of Chicago, as you know, has had a focus on the neighborhood of Woodlawn for a lot of different reasons. The Obama Presidential Center, some concerns about values and rents going up. And so we created a low-cost construction financing program. We call it the Woodlawn Construction Fund. It's available at 2.5%. So as you're, thinking about construction financing, that's a pretty doggone good deal. If you're going to access that financing, you can use 𝗖𝗵𝗶𝗶 to do your perm loan. You can use anyone you'd like to do your perm loan, but you are required to keep 50% of your units affordable. And I'm sorry to say this again, because it's another set of rents at 80% of AMI. And those rent levels end up being round about $1,200 to $1,400, again, depending on your bedroom size. So that's a very nice program if you're planning on doing some work in Woodlawn. There's also a single family component if you're thinking of getting investing in a 1 to 4 and then selling it to an owner occupant. So that low cost financing is available both for multi and single.
Awesome. I do have a lot if anyone's looking to buy a lot in Woodlawn or a joint venture. So let me know. What else you got? I think there's a couple more, right?
Yeah. So we expanded a program that CIC had been running for a few years called the TIF Purchase Rehab Program. So as you know, there are many TIF districts across the city. There are always a few that we had a little bit of TIF money in to help meet an owner's investment in order to rehab a building that needed the rehab. The city has recently greatly expanded that program. So there are a lot more TIF districts that are eligible. Those TIF districts tend to correspond to the city's Invest Southwest program. If you guys have heard about that, those are corridors where they're really trying to get big investments for those commercial corridors. So those commercial corridors, if they have TIF districts, have been now included in our program. And again, the way it works is depending how much TIF money you're asking for to help you rehab these buildings along these corridors or very close to these corridors. If you're asking for that money, we will underwrite you, and then you are required to keep some portion of those units affordable. Again, it's sliding scale depending on how much TIF money you get. But it's a very exciting expansion of a program, and we're really excited to be working with the city to complement and support their Invest Southwest program.
So much out there, so many ways to take just be opportunistic about this. Stacie, what about agency debt opportunities? Because I know that's another big one for you guys.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have been diving into this, knowing that a lot of our borrowers are growing, you know, and once they reach a certain level, they're looking for agency debt and they're going to other sources. So to the extent that folks like CIC, I mean, everyone loves CIC. What am I talking about? But to the extent that you appreciate CIC's service, high touch, you know, we can be sometimes more speedy than some of these other groups. But CIC has definitely actually executed some of these agency deals and has been successful, and the borrowers are happy. And again, I believe we've done Freddie, and we are happy to look at anything that you've got out there because, again, we feel like we can provide that service that some of these other shops cannot.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. I got one more question before we wrap. We have, a lot of our audience, a lot of people I deal with is people in their 20s and 30s looking to just kind of grow as individual into their career, into their real estate. Like, CIC is like such a behind the scenes, like to what really is going to build and continue the city to be a great city. How do people get involved, or what would be your recommendation? If I was somebody that wanted to work more behind the scenes or start working for, or start learning more about MacArthur or Preservation Pact, or how do you get involved, or what routes if someone wanted to do more like the long-term future growth of the city? How can people get involved more so in that?
Right now the city actually has a very big effort around planning. This is very new. The city of Chicago typically has not engaged anyone beyond kind of a small group of insiders as they think about their plans and work moving forward. And they've tried to create, I believe, I am not personally involved in this, but I've certainly seen a lot of folks who are interested in it, and the city's been sending out a lot of information, but really kind of like small planning groups. There are a lot of, I would say there are a lot of ways to try to engage and get involved. You may bristle when I say this, but, sometimes the better aldermen actually care about what people have to say. And they might have advisory groups and so forth. I think there are a lot of ways to engage on a hyper local level without sort of, thinking, you don't have to think about big foundations or the federal government necessarily. get involved in your local groups. I mean, honestly, that is what makes a difference. I mean, when you think about city policy, that's who they're listening to. So I would say that's a good start. Definitely look at the careers section of the CIC website. I tell you what, we've got some great open positions. We'd love to have energetic, talented folks joining up with CIC. We've got a new, flexible work from home strategy that we're trying out. And it's a really great place to work, if I do say so myself. So that's definitely some ways to go. Also, depending on your investors, if they work in higher cost markets, CIC sometimes has a reputation for only working in those lower value markets, the low and moderate income markets. We do have a program called the Opportunity Investment Fund. It's low cost mezzanine debt targeted to higher cost markets. We just got flexibility to even go more, to create more favorable terms for folks who want to do this. There's a requirement for affordability, but it's only 20% of the units. It pairs very nicely with that property tax incentive that I just mentioned. So for your folks, for those young folks you just mentioned, if those folks are in those higher cost markets, CIC is also trying to do some work in those higher cost markets and not just in the markets where we're typically active.
Gotcha. I lied. One more question before we move to the wrap. But you've been part of CIC for over a decade now. You just took on this huge role here. I think just earlier this year. Like, what's around the corner? Like, what you've had 10 years to get ready for this? Like, what's around the corner? You got obviously some big shoes to fill. Like, give us kind of some insight of what you're thinking.
Number one, bulking up big time to fill those shoes. I mean, bulking up. I think CIC is successful because we have an amazing staff. I mean, I just can't say it enough. Absolutely amazing, taking their lead, understanding what they know and taking CIC in these directions that the neighborhoods need. Same thing, getting into the neighborhoods. The neighborhoods know us. I think they know us. I don't know how well we have kept up with what's happening in our neighborhoods. In order to serve them better, we need to understand what's going on there, what the needs are. I think we generally know. I am excited about sort of deepening those relationships. That's both with our borrowers and owners, but also the groups that work in those neighborhoods. Nice.
Good answer. Good answer. All right, let's move to the wrap up. So first question, along the lines where you just answered, but you have to give me a different answer. Like what's been CIC's competitive advantage? You've been around since the 80s. Like you guys continue to evolve, continue to grow, continue to extend your reach. Like what's been your advantage? How have you guys been able to do it?
I got to say, we know our markets. We know our markets. We know our borrowers. We know what makes sense, right? And so if there's someone who comes to us and says, hey, I'm a new borrower. All the community banks and big banks turn me down. Will CIC lend to me? We will look. But if the answer is no, the answer is no. What we do is we say, here's what you need. You need to build up your savings account a little bit more. You need to take our property management training courses. So it is a very hands-on approach, a very borrower-focused approach, and a very neighborhood-focused approach. If someone comes to us with a dumb deal and they're like, hey, I just got a great deal. I can buy, a big South Shore 200-unit building for $140 a door. We might be like, you know what, maybe not a great call. Whereas another lender would say, does the appraisal support it? Great, let's do it. So that's the difference, right? We're here for you to serve the neighborhoods and to serve our borrowers.
I love it. More of a coaching approach when you do business with CIC versus a lender borrower relationship.
Very hands-on.
I appreciate that over the years as well as a client.
Yeah, it's all on the website, but we'll link to it as well. Like all the webinars, there's so many free resources from CIC. Like leverage it, use it.
Absolutely. That property tax incentive I just mentioned, September 23rd. Not sure if this will air before then, but we do have a webinar for that.
We'll put it on our Facebook group and all that. So,
and we'll have it recorded.
All right, perfect. We'll link to the link. So,
Stacie, what's one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Look around, make sure that you know that neighborhood. Make sure that this is a market you understand. Maybe you live there, maybe you didn't live there. Make sure you hang out there and you know what's going on, both in the on the blocks where you're buying, but also in the neighborhood itself. We don't want to have someone buying from a place they don't have any contact with that neighborhood and market. we love that our borrowers understand their neighborhoods. That's the best advice I could give.
Awesome. What do you do for fun?
I do a lot of stuff with my kids. I have 3 boys. So we're out and about quite a bit. We like riding bikes. We recently went kayaking. And I just love being outside. This is one great thing about, not many great things about COVID, but occasionally if I don't have meetings, I like sitting outside on my back porch. It's lovely.
Nice.
What's a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners?
Self-development, I don't know much about, and you can ask my family, they can affirm that. A book I just read that I loved is The Splendid and the Vile by the same guy who wrote Devil in the White City. Right. Another book I just finished last night that I adored is 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵, which is about a couple of musicians and an amazing fiction book, sort of like a book within a book. And it's compelling. I love reading.
Awesome. Devil in the White City. That's you, Mark.
Yeah.
I that one for a while.
I didn't write it down when she said the same author. You saw me grab for the pen to write that down. All right. So besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
So this is not a person, but a great resource. Again, coming back to the top of the call is the ADU website on the City of Chicago's webpage has a lot of information about the pilot program and about what you need to do to get started.
Awesome.
Stacie, thank you so much. You've provided a ton of value to our listeners. It's been one of the more informational episodes we've had. How can they learn more about you? And is there any way they can provide value to you?
Definitely go to the CIC website. On the CIC website, you can link to the Preservation Compact website. And both of those websites have lots and lots of information. Like I said, we're always happy to hear from either potential borrowers, existing borrowers who want to plug in, because there are a lot of ways they can plug in. So check out our websites, preservationcompact.org. And the CIC website, which is, I don't know the website. I am so sorry.
No worries, Jemmy. We'll edit that. We'll edit that out.
Excellent. I think that makes me a bad CEO, but I am not on the website very much. Unfortunately, I think other people are. So. Well,
that's what you Google it for. That's what you Google for. You Google CIC and then you get the website. That's how you do
it. Thank you.
So
awesome. All right. Great stuff. Mark, this one's definitely multiple choice because you're not going to know this one. This is going to be a pure guessing game for you.
Okay.
For the Chicago fact. And every time I do this research, I keep finding out Chicago was the first to do X. Like we hold that title for like 1,000 different things. But for today's, this medical procedure was first performed in Chicago in 1893 by Northwestern grad. So tying it all together with Stacie here. But that medical procedure was kidney transplant, open heart surgery, a blood transfusion, or successful brain surgery.
Open heart, I would say.
All right, Stacie, do you want to guess?
I'm going to say blood transfusion.
It was open heart. Mark, yes. Nice on the guess there.
Probability played good. Awesome. I'm just happy I got it right. Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, we are the first of so many different things. And it's crazy to think like the first of like just like that crazy of a procedure wasn't even that long ago. Like when you look at the whole history of the world, like it was pretty recent.
Yeah, 100-some years ago. It's like, oh, we've been around for a lot longer than that.
Those things we take for granted. All 4 of those things that you listed off as like we take those for granted, but they really only started doing them in the last 125 years. So it's crazy. All right, guys. Stacie, Tom, awesome show. Listeners, check out on our website. We got the rent versus sell calculator on there. If you want to run kind of your numbers on if you should hold a property, you should sell a property, it's a good calculator for that. Also check the website for information on the topics we talked about at the top of the show. Things are going to affect you if you're a landlord in the city of Chicago. Leave us a review, refer us out. Stacie, Tom, thank you very much. Awesome show. Stacie, we're going to have you back here someday again with some more information, and we're excited for you and everything you're going to do for CIC going forward.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was really fun talking today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks all.